Member for Saanich North and Islands.
Haich-Kasiem, Mr. Speaker. Osiem. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to speak for the first time in this place, to speak in support for the amendment put forward by the Leader of the Official Opposition, that Her Honour's present government does not have the confidence of this House. I felt it was important to speak to this amendment to explain why I cannot support this throne speech and why this BC Liberal government does not have my confidence. But before I do so, I'd like to offer some sincere thanks to my family, my friends, and supporters, to everyone who worked so hard for the months and months leading up to the election. Thank you. High school. I'm honored to acknowledge my wife, Emily, who's here with us this morning, and my incredible kids, Silas and Ella, for supporting my work over the past 8 years that I've been in governance. I love you, and I'm honored to walk this journey with you. High school. I would like to recognize my parents, Carl and Sylvia, my elders, myself, Wayne, my ancestors, my grandparents, Laura and Ernie Olson, Phyllis and Don Snoblin, their guidance, their love, their commitment to their values and their principles, their actions, not just their words, laid a solid foundation on rock, not sand, for me to build on. High school. It is because of you all, because of them, that I have the privilege to sit in this House and represent my home community of Saanich, of Saanich North and the Islands. High school. I would like to acknowledge all the chiefs, mayors and councillors, Islands trustees, regional directors, and school board trustees in Saanich North and the Islands for doing their best to govern our communities. I raise my hands to them. High school. Thank you. Siem. I would also like to acknowledge my cousin Len Morris Jr., who represented Canada yesterday in the World Outrigger Championships in Tahiti. Len is the Canadian champion, and finished 14th in the distance race yesterday. Len is a Saanich paddler. We are mariner people, the saltwater people they call us, and Len has carried the tradition of his family, the Morris family, proudly all the way to Tahiti and represented all of us very proudly. High squad to him. Later today, you'll meet my daughter Ella, who's going to be here visiting the legislature with her grandma Sil. She and her brother Silas, their classmates and their friends, are my inspiration. When I ran to represent Saanich North and the Islands, I ran on a commitment to make decisions based on principles and evidence, not political calculation and opportunism. To put people's interests first, ahead of the special interests and corporate donors. In considering my vote, I have these commitments, which I made to my constituents in mind. First and foremost, our responsibility is to our constituents. My responsibility is to the people of Saanich North and the Islands, who gave me a mandate to sit in this House and advocate for their needs, the needs of their loved ones, and the needs of our community. 8 years ago, I ran for local government because I believe in community service. I was the first person to step off Sartlip Reserve to run in Central Saanich because I believe we have a responsibility to bring people together, to bring communities together. We are stronger together. This House is stronger together. And I believe in our democracy. I believe we have a responsibility to make this House work, not to tear it down until we have the right amount of power we believe we deserve or we feel we are owed. Ultimately, in considering the throne speech and the amendment tabled by the Leader of the Opposition, the official opposition, I have to ask myself, can I trust this government to act on principle and put the interests of people first and foremost in their decision-making? The Premier keeps talking about working across party lines. But everything that the BC Liberal government has done in the past few weeks, and in particularly the past few days, has undercut this sentiment. This entire week has been designed to try to confuse not only the MLAs of this House, but the public at large. Let me offer just a few examples. The Premier delayed bringing the legislature back for weeks longer than was necessary, and was needlessly delayed testing, and has needlessly delayed testing the confidence of this House. The bills they introduced on official party status and banning big money were intended to try to buy our support. They've now said over and over again that our votes against those bills show an unwillingness to work together. But we know that these are nothing but cynical games. We have been clear from day one that we are willing and eager to work with all sides of the House, both the Liberals and the NDP, to bring forward good public policy. However, we've also been clear that the first step for this government is to humbly test the confidence of this House. Just yesterday, the Premier said that she will essentially be advising the Lieutenant Governor to call an election, despite the fact that most British Columbians do not want this. Ultimately, my concern is that I do not see that this government is truly acting in good faith, working across party lines for the benefit of all British Columbians. I cannot, in good faith, feel that I'm serving the needs of my constituents if I vote to prop up this government that has, for 16 years, put their own self-interest and the interest of their corporate donors ahead of the people's interest. One reason that's close to my heart for why I cannot have the confidence in this government at this time is because of their approach to Indigenous people, to Huilnuk, over their past terms as government. They've taken a disrespectful and litigious approach to their dealings with Indigenous people. My father is an example of that. My father spent more than a decade defending his rights against a government that wanted to take them away. His treaty rights that have been acknowledged by courts over and over and over again, it was this government that forced him to defend his humanity. It's unbelievable. For months, we toiled to have this government protect a Coast Salish grave islet on Salt Spring Island. For months, the minister told us he had no mandate to stop the construction of a mansion over top of grave sites, a sacred place. Finally, only after that place had been buried under concrete, did the minister finally gain access to the resources needed to buy the islet, and for an astronomical amount. The taxpayers of this province paid an astronomical amount for that islet, unnecessarily. This government has consistently not addressed the principle of free, prior, and informed consent. The ministers of this government are still using the outdated language of consultation and accommodation. These days, when Indigenous leaders hear the words consultation and accommodation, they wonder if we are asking what hotel they want to stay in, or if the housing in their communities is sufficient. This government has not declared any intention to fully adopt UNDRIP, the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, and they raise concerns about consent, claiming a fictitious veto power granted Indigenous people, despite the fact that consent is the very notion that courts have been toiling over for generations, finally coming to some resolution in Chilcotin. We have a responsibility to all British Columbians to renew our relationship with Indigenous people and begin an honest dialogue about what consent means to them. We must come to terms in a meaningful way with the reality that has always existed here in British Columbia. Ignoring this is wrong, and it will cost all British Columbians and our economy now and in the future. It's just bad policy. And it is for this and many reasons on this file that I cannot support this government and that they do not have my confidence. As a former municipal councillor, this government's relationship with local governments have been frustrating. Local governments are the closest to the people. They need a provincial government that supports them. Their initiatives are frustrated as soon as they get to this provincial government, often losing momentum or fizzling out entirely. They don't have access to the resources that they need and have been downloaded extra responsibilities without any way to pay. The Metro Vancouver mayors have been ignored, and the governance on the Gulf Islands have been ignored. Salt Spring Island, a beautiful gem of a community, has been split in half and gutted over an incorporation program that has been less than ideal, to put it mildly. And all this because they and the other islands have had sufficient infrastructure challenges under the watch of this provincial government. Their roads have deteriorated. Ferry access has become unaffordable. Their economies significantly damaged. It's clearly time to reset, to hit reset on this government. More important than the election platform that we ran on are the values that those platforms are based on. We've been clear that we have a hopeful vision for the future of British Columbia, which has the health and well-being of British Columbians at its center. I am who I say I am. I asked voters in Saanich North and the islands to entrust their vote to my care for this term. And I promised them that I would be responsible with the mandate that they have entrusted with me. I am deeply committed to honoring our responsibility to those who come after us, thinking through the effects of our actions on the next 7 generations, and putting the principle of intergenerational equity first and foremost are the values that I was raised with, and they are reflected in the BC Greens approach to governance. Considering my values and principles, I do not feel that I have, in fact, I know that I don't have any confidence in this government that they are going to work in the best interests of all British Columbians. I hope that the BC Liberals will put much of the gamesmanship of the past week behind them as we move forward, because I believe that we have an incredibly exciting opportunity in front of us. During the election, people told me and my campaign team day in and day out on the doorstep that they wanted change. Not just a change in government, but a change in how politics works in BC. And the riding that I represent isn't some left-wing riding. This is a riding that's been held by BC Liberals and federal Conservatives for decades. But I heard day in and day out that they wanted change. They wanted change from the current leadership and direction that we had. They wanted change in the way decisions are made in this place. And now we have an opportunity to deliver on that change. But not only do we have an opportunity, I believe, and I stand here today certain that we have a responsibility. Our job, all 87 of us in this chamber, have a job to make this work in the best interests of all British Columbians. Ultimately, we have everything we need in this House to make it work. For the first time in years, we have agreement from all parties on dozens of major policies that will improve the lives of all British Columbians, from north to south, east to west. These policies will enhance the lives of our senior citizens and create a bright future for our children. As my colleague from Cowichan Valley said yesterday, it is time for a compassionate government, humbled by the duty that we have to govern this province for all British Columbians. So CM, I will be supporting the leader of the official opposition's amendment to the throne speech. And I look forward to returning to this chamber with a renewed optimism, a renewed sense of hope, a renewed sense of confidence in our government and the future of our great province. Thank you. Hai Square CM, OCM.